Okay, now we're moving on and then we're going to talk about supply. So this is going to feel like kind of a mirror image of everything we just talked about with demand. So we're going to try and go a little bit faster here. So first, again, we're going to start out with definitions, and our first definition is quantity supplied. So quantity supply is the amount of a good or service that our producers are both willing and able to sell at some specific price. So much like our definition for quantity demanded, for quantity supplied, we're looking at the amount that our producers are willing to sell at that specific or that given price. So we can imagine that I'm running a lemonade stand, and let's say that right now at my lemonade stand, I can charge, $1 per cup of lemonade. So that's the price that I face, that's the price that I'm selling my lemonade for, and at this price of $1 per cup, the quantity of lemonade that I'm willing to supply is, let's say, 50 cups. Now, if the price of lemonade goes up, now let's say it goes up to $2 a cup, my incentive as a business is to make money, right? So if the price of lemonade goes up, I'm probably gonna like that because it means that I'm selling my product for more, so I'm gonna be making more money. So at this new higher price, my quantity of lemonade that I'm willing to supply, let's say it goes up to 100 cups. All right, so what we're doing here is for each specific price, we're trying to figure out the quantity of lemonade that I am willing and able to supply. All right, our next definition is the definition for supply. And so supply is just going to be the combination of all of the different quantities supplied at each of our specific prices. So supply is the various amounts of a good or service that our producers are willing and able to sell at each possible price. So if we put together all the information we have for all of the different quantities of lemonade I'm willing to supply at every possible price, then we're going to put together our supply. And so using this definition of supply, we're going to draw our supply curve that's going to illustrate all of the different quantities supplied at each possible price. Okay, so I've gone and reset my graph of my supply curve here. So we're still looking at the supply of lemonade. My supply curve is upward sloping, and I've labeled it with an S1 just so we know that it's our original supply curve. I've also written our 5 different supply shifters here on the board. So if we have a change in any one of these factors, this is going to lead to a shift in our supply curve. And just like we did with demand, we're going to go through each of these one by one. The other thing we want to know is if we have an increase in supply, we're going to shift our supply curve to the right. And if we have a decrease in supply that results from a change in one of our factors, we're going to shift our supply curve to the left. So first, let's talk about the number of sellers. So we're looking at the supply of lemonade. This is telling us all of the different quantities of lemonade that are supplied by all of our sellers, depending on the price. So if we have an increase in the number of sellers in this lemonade market, there's more sellers, there's going to be more supply, right? So if we have an increase in the number of sellers, we're going to show an increase in our supply. So our supply curve is going to move from S1 to S2. Our supply curve shifts to the right, and this is our increase in supply. All right, next, let's talk about a change in technology. So the special thing about technology is it can help us to produce things more quickly or more efficiently. So when we have some kind of change in technology, it might allow our producers to produce more efficiently and actually supply more. So we can imagine that maybe there's some new technology developed that helps to juice lemons more quickly. And so this new technology is going to increase the supply of lemonade. So if we have this new technology that makes it faster or easier to produce lemonade, we're going to see an increase in the supply of lemonade. Okay, next up, we're going to talk about number 3, which is a change in the input price. And so what we mean by this is we're looking at the change in the price of some input good that is used to produce the product that we're talking about. So when we have a change in the price of lemonade, that's just moving us from point to point along the curve. But if we have a change in the price of an input, maybe the change in the price of lemons or the change in the price of sugar, this is going to affect our supply of lemonade. So lemons and sugar are both inputs that are used to make lemonade. So let's imagine that there's an increase in the price of sugar. If I put myself in the mindset of a lemonade producer and sugar gets more expensive, this makes it more expensive for me to produce my product. And so because of this, I'm going to be discouraged from selling, right? If I have to spend more on my inputs, my business is going to be less profitable, so I might not produce as much. So if I see an input price increase, this is going to cause a decrease in supply. On the other hand, if the price of my input good was to go down, this would make it cheaper and easier for me to produce, and then I would have seen an increase in my supply. So when input prices go up, supply decreases. When input prices go down, supply increases. All right, next up, we're going to talk about taxes or subsidies that might affect our producers. So for a producer, a tax is a negative thing, right? So a tax is some fee that's being charged by the government that a producer might have to pay in order to sell its product. So if the government taxes lemonade production, this is going to make it more expensive for our lemonade producers to sell their product, and this is going to discourage them from producing. So when we see an increase in taxes, we're going to see a decrease in supply. On the other hand, a subsidy is kind of like free money for a business. So the government might implement a subsidy or provide a subsidy to a certain industry because they're trying to encourage businesses in that industry to produce more. So the government will grant these businesses some money in the form of a subsidy to try and help them pay for those production costs, and it will make production cheaper. So if we have an increase in subsidies provided to lemonade producers, this makes it cheaper for these producers to sell their product, and that is going to cause an increase in the supply of lemonade. All right, our last shifter here is future expectations. So this is very similar to our fifth shifter for demand. If our producers expect some kind of change in the price in the future, it might cause them to change their behavior today. So again, whatever we're drawing on the graph is what's happening today, and we're seeing how our behaviors today respond to this expectation about the future. So if lemonade producers expect the price of their product to go down in the future, they expect that they're going to be able to sell their product for much less in the future, they want to try and take advantage of the high price that's available to them today, right? So if producers of lemonade think the price is going to go down in the future, they want to sell as much as they can right now to take advantage of that high price. So when they think the price is going down in the future, supply is going to increase today. On the other hand, if lemonade producers think that their price is going to go up in the future, then they're going to hold on to that inventory and wait to sell it so they can take advantage of that higher price later on. And so in that case, we would see a decrease in supply. If our lemonade producers expect the price of their product to increase in the future, they're going to decrease their supply today and wait to sell it when that price rises. All right, so this is it for our section on supply. So just a reminder, when we have a change in the price of the good itself, our supply curve does not shift. We're just moving from point to point along the curve. If we have a change in one of our 5 supply shifters, that's when we're going to see a shift in our supply curve. All right, next up, we're going to combine our demand curve and our supply curve into one graph to create our model of the market or our model of supply and demand.